my gorgeous plant people, welcome back to Rooting Mindfully. My name is Iana, and today I'm going to help you guys grow nice, lush, and full plants, so stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I always get a lot of comments on how lush and full my plants are, especially when I do my houseplant tours. You guys always comment on how beautiful my plants are and how lush they look. So I just wanted to give you guys 5 tips on how you guys can have your own lush plants, how you guys can grow your own lush plants, because like honestly, it's not that I really don't do that much to my plants. And to be honest, I am a more hands-off plant parent. I'm not always checking on my plants, and I just feel like these tips that I'm going to give you guys are things that I honestly do with my plants. So if you guys want to learn how I grow lush and full plants, just stay tuned. And so the first tip I'm going to give you guys is probably a no-brainer, but honestly the first tip is to have the correct amount of lighting. And you guys are going to say, duh, Ayana. But seriously, when you have the correct amount of lighting, your plants will develop bigger leaves. They will produce more growth, faster growth. If your plants aren't getting enough lighting, you could have smaller leaves developing on your plants. Your plants could be growing, but they could have longer petioles rather than, more compact growth, which a lot of people do look for. Because when your plants are more stretched out and have more space between their petioles, it does make the plant more straggly looking. It doesn't make the plant look more lush. So when you give your plants a lot more lighting, especially for instance for me, if I put my plant under my Sandy light or if I put my plant outside, I have more compact growth and shorter distance between the petioles, which makes the plant look a lot fuller. So that would be my first tip, is to make sure that you have the correct amount of lighting. If you don't have enough lighting, say in the winter time, then you can raise your blinds up. That's what my mom does for her plants in the winter. She raises her blinds. I do that for my collection. I'll raise my blinds, or I'll make sure my blinds are open. If you do that already, maybe you have to supplement with, Growlights. I get questions about what kind of lights I use. I use mostly Sandy lights. I do use other lights. They're also linked in my description, but my favorite lights are the Sandy lights, and they do help out my plants tremendously. So that's the first tip, is to make sure you have the correct amount of lighting. The second tip is you want to make sure that you're watering your plants correctly. Now, you could say that this is a kind of easy tip, but it can be, you could miss this tip easily. If you don't water your plants, if you're letting your plants dry out too much, then you're stunning the growth that your plants could potentially have, because you're constantly letting your plant out to, you're constantly letting your plant dry out too much. So this is why I always emphasize using a moisture meter. I still use a moisture meter, and I've been growing plants for about 3 years, but honestly, moisture meters make it so much easier to maintain your plants. I always say in my care videos that most of my plants I will water when they get to about a 1 or a 2. I try not to, let them go out too dry, because sometimes when a plant goes too dry, especially with like Syndapsis or plants that curl up and will let you know that they're really dry. If you do that too often, sometimes the plant won't come back, or you will stunt the growth. So you might not get as big, it's big leaves. The plant might put off tiny leaves. So you want to make sure that you're watering correctly, making sure that the plant doesn't dry out too much, as well as you will also want to make sure that you're not overwatering the plant, because when you overwater the plant, then you'll get yellow leaves, and those leaves you have to pick those off. So you know how that just when you pick off yellow leaves, and you have spots where the leaves are missing, hence the plant not being lush. As well as you could also rot your roots, which will prevent you from getting any further growth. So Tip number 2 is to make sure you're watering your plant correctly, making sure that you use the moisture meter, which is very helpful. Tip number 3, and which a lot of people debate on this subject, but I'm going to say what I do, and I would say to fertilize your plants all year round as long as your plants are growing. If your plants are growing, why not fertilize your plants as they're growing? If your plants aren't really growing, then you can back off of the fertilizer. But I fertilize my plants all year round. As long as they're putting out growth, I'm giving them fertilizer. And the fertilizer will just help to give them extra nutrients that they need to grow nice and big. I use the Alaskan brand fish fertilizer, and my plants really love that fertilizer. And I've seen really good growth. I've also used Espoma in the past. That's a really good fertilizer. I would use that, but my plants are a lot bigger and I have a bigger collection, so it's not economical for me to buy that one, but that's also a good brand of fertilizer. But you could use the fertilizer of your choice, but like I said, if your plants are still growing, I would go ahead and fertilize them. Now, if you're going to use the fish fertilizer, I would not. If you mix the fish fertilizer in with your water, please make sure that you use that fertilized water, or you throw it out if you're not going to use the rest of it, because trust and believe, you will not want that smell in your house, because it will last a couple days and you will wish that you wouldn't have done that, because I've done that multiple times and the smell is not pretty. So if you're going to use the fish fertilizer or any organic fertilizers, make sure you use it all up, or you just toss it outside on the grass, because you don't want that smell in your house. Number 4, you want to go ahead and increase the humidity in your house. You just want to make sure that your plants are nice and lubricated, so that way they can unfurl their leaves without any friction. So that way it can prevent any scarring or tearing of the leaves, or if you have plants that will poke through their own leaves. So you can do this by buying humidifiers, grouping your plants together, and other things like that. I do have a humidity video and I will link it if you guys want to check that out. But if you increase your humidity, then your plants will also be happy, because as we know, we are growing tropical plants and they are used to being in warm, humid environments. So you just want to make sure that you're mimicking the environment that they're used to growing in. So that way, they can grow wonderfully in your house if you're not able to keep them outside. So just want to increase the humidity, make sure your house is pretty warm, at least I want to say at least 60 degrees in your home, which most of us will probably have our house at least 60 degrees, and your plants should grow wonderfully. And the last tip, and probably the most surprising tip, is to prune your plants. Now, I am one that prior to all of the changes that I made this year, I never really wanted to cut my plants. I would cut my plants here and there, but say my monstera, I don't know how many houseplant tours I mentioned that I never wanted to cut my monstera. And this year I finally took the plunge and I cut my big monstera, and I could not be more happy with how it turned out. I absolutely love how my monstera looks, and I'll put a picture in here so that way you guys can see what it looks like. And if I have footage of what it looked like before, I'll also put that in so that way you guys can see the difference. If not, check out my earlier houseplant tours and you'll see the difference of my monstera. But just pruning it all the way back has created a much fuller look to the plant, because in my prior videos you could see that the plant had about a foot or two at the bottom that was just empty space, and honestly it didn't look good to me. And I was trying to think of what I wanted to do to fix that issue, but I just really didn't want to cut it, and I'm just so glad that I took the time and finally made the decision to cut it this year, because I love the way it looks so much better. I also have another example of a plant that I pruned a couple times, and I really like the way that it is growing. So this is my Monstera Siltepecana, and if you saw my previous plant tours, I had this plant on a moss pole, and it was just straggly looking the way it was, you know, wound around the moss pole, and I had lost a couple leaves, so there was kind of some holes in there. But as you can see, I've chopped this plant quite a bit. I pruned this plant so many times because it grows so fast, and I wasn't sure how I wanted it to look. But honestly, this is like the best that this plant has looked ever. And I've tried this plant multiple times, and this is the best it's ever looked. And so I pruned this plant multiple times. If let me see if I can see any. I don't see any places that I pruned it. But what I did was I just stuck them all back into the pot, and then it just filled out, and it just looks so much better. And not only does it look better, but it's also growing bigger leaves, and this is without a moss pole. So there could be a potential for your plants to still grow nicely without a moss pole. But actually, here's a piece right here, this dried up piece. This is actually one of the stems that was pruned off. But yeah, pruning your plants can also create a more full look. And as well as an extra tip is just to buy more than one plant. This, when I bought this from Steve's Leaves, it was actually 2 different plants. So this portion is one, and this portion is another one. And you can see that has also created a bigger or more full plant. So I do this do this pretty often. I've done it with some of my Syndapsis. The easiest thing you could do is just buy more than one plant and put it in the same pot, and that will instantly give you a lush look. And of course, you would just have to maintain it from there. Alright, so those are my tips on creating lush and full plants. I hope that it helped you guys. I really wanted to share these tips because I want to help you guys create your own lush plants. You know, I have pretty simple maintenance and care for my plants. I will do more videos since it's been requested to show maintenance and care of my plants, but I am showing you guys what I do with my plants. I started pruning my plants. I put my plants on moss poles. You know, I am showing you guys what I'm doing with my plants, and I hope it's helping, and so that way you guys can create your own environments. But yeah, so if you guys like this video, let me know. Please like and subscribe if you like my content, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye.